Afternoon, and thanks for joining us for a Tax Practitioner Board webinar. My name is Ashley Dowsard, and I'll be hosting today's session. Today I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and their continuing connection to land, waters, and community. I'd like to pay my respect to them, their cultures, and elders, past and present. To begin, I have some quick housekeeping messages. First, to access today's slides, you can visit our webinars resource hub at tpb.gov.au/webinar-hub. We'll also email you a copy of the slides following the webinar. Today's webinar counts towards your continuing professional education or CPE, and you can claim 1 hour for attending. In relation to claiming your CPE, we'll issue an attendance certificate to those of you staying online for the webinar today. Today's webinar format is a bit different from our usual webinars. Rather than a presentation, this is an open session where you can ask us questions in relation to your obligations as a registered tax practitioner. To ask questions, simply type your question into the Q&A. To find the Q&A, simply hover your mouse over the screen and a range of icons will appear on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to send through as many questions as you'd like. If you have a question for a specific director, make sure you mention their name to address your question to them. You can also use the chat function to speak with other participants. We won't be monitoring the chat closely throughout the presentation, so if you need a response from us, be sure to use the Q&A. I also want to note that we have a lot of people online today, so we may not get to all your questions. However, we'll be answering them via our webinars resources hub, so keep an eye on the website in the coming weeks, and we will share responses to the commonly asked questions there. I'd like to first introduce Jeanette Liu, our Assistant Secretary who oversees policy, governance and reform at the TPB. We are also joined by the directors and senior leaders of the TPB today, and they are Christine Gordon, Director of Client Services, Craig Woodburn, Director of Technology, Ryan McDonald, Acting Director of Compliance, Sally Richards, Director of the Legal Unit, and Tariq Kumar, Director of Policy and Legislation. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Julie, who will kick things off.
Thanks, Ashley, and good morning or afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. I've got a question to kick us off today for Jeanette. So, Jeanette, I was just wondering if you can take us through some of the reforms announced by government and how these will impact our tax practitioners.
Great, thanks, Julie. It's a really great question, and I probably could spend the entire hour talking about that, but I might just give sort of a nutshell overview, and then if there are further more detailed questions, please send them through that Q&A that Ashley mentioned before. So with reform, there's a lot of stuff going on in the tax practitioner space. So back in around August of last year, the government announced quite a significant package of reforms to enhance the integrity of not only the tax system, but also the tax profession, because there were some areas of misconduct that the government was keen to ensure that were being addressed. Now, at the moment, the reforms really work in 3 current categories. We've got a set of reforms which has now become law. There's a second set which is currently proposed law, it's before Parliament under consideration. And then the third category are areas of potential reform that government is currently consulting on. Now, if I first sort of focus on what has now become law, there were a few changes made late 2023, where the government decided that they were going to firstly expand the Code of Professional Conduct to ensure that tax practitioners could not engage disqualified entities. Now, I'm seeing a bit of feedback come through, Julie, about my sound quality being an issue. Any suggestions how I could improve that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Jeanette, if you've got a headset that you could probably use that might be a little bit better, a bit clearer for people.
I don't, unfortunately. I could put my AirPods in, but that'll take me a moment to do.
Well, why don't you finish off this answer, and then if you don't mind doing that in the background while we answer some of the other questions, that would probably be a good idea, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
So sorry, going back to the things that have now become law, there's also a new breach reporting requirement that will commence from the 1st of July 2024, where tax practitioners have an obligation to notify the TPB where they might have breached the code to a significant extent. That also applies to other tax practitioners that you might be observing. There are also changes that allow the minister to expand the code of professional conduct as well. In terms of those things that have not yet become law and are currently before Parliament, that does include changes to the whistleblower protections and also expanding what appears in the public register. And then just the last point, which I'll quickly touch upon, is around current consultations being run by Treasury. They are looking at reviewing the scope of the TPB sanction powers. They're also looking at the registrations framework, and also, as I mentioned before, how they might actually exercise that power to expand the code. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Jeanette. I'll give you a bit of a breather to put your AirPods in. And while you're doing that, I think we'll go to Sally. I've got a question here, Sally, asking how many TPB decisions are currently under review, and how are you ensuring a level playing field for tax practitioners that do the right thing?
Thanks, Julie. I'll just check. Hopefully my sound is okay.
You're good, yes.
All right, great. So currently we have 27 decisions under review that have been made by the TPB, and some of those are in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, or the AAT, and some are in the Federal Court. These types of decisions include where we've rejected a registration application on the basis we determined that the applicant didn't have the right quals or experience, so we're keeping them out of the system where they don't meet the registration requirements. And then also termination of registration for things such as code breaches, or where an event's affected registration and we determine that someone's not fit and proper anymore. And at this time, we can also impose a non-application period from 1 to 5 years. At the moment, we've also got 3 civil penalty applications underway in the Federal Court. And so these relate to unregistered conduct. So when people are providing tax agent services for a fee or reward, but they don't have registration as required under our legislation, the TASA. So in our most recent penalty decision that was handed down by the Federal Court, they imposed a penalty of $230,000 on an individual for providing tax agent services for a fee without the required registration. And in some of our other matters, we've even had some jail terms imposed where the individual has continued to still provide tax agent services despite the action we've taken in the Federal Court. So I guess, Julie, I'd say from the level playing field, we really focus on pursuing matters that ensure public protection foremost, and then also maintain the integrity of the profession by trying to deter unethical, unprofessional and illegal conduct. Thanks.
Thanks, Sally. That's reassuring. Ryan, I might bring you into the conversation now. I've got someone asking here, if I suspect that a business is trading insolvent, what obligations do BAS agents have in relation to that?
Thanks, Julie. So if as a BAS agent you do think that one of your clients is trading whilst insolvent, that's a discussion that you should be having with the director of the company to ensure that they're aware of their obligations under the Corporations Act, and advising them to consider what their cash flow status is and whether or not they are actually trading whilst insolvent.
Thank you for that. Tarika, I've got a question now about CPE. I'm just wondering if you could give us a bit of information here about how many hours of CPE are to be completed by a tax agent in a financial year.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So our policy around CPE for tax agents is it's a triennium basis. So it's a 3-year basis from when your registration commences. And it's 120 hours over 3 years with a minimum of 20 in any year. So you just manage that 3-year period and ensuring that you do at least 20 hours in every year and 120 over that 3-year period.
Great, thank you very much for that. I've got a couple of people just asking questions about webinar certificates. We had someone attend yesterday that hasn't received it yet. Just letting you know that we haven't issued those yet, but we will be issuing those in a couple of days. And yes, everyone will receive one for attending the webinar today as well. Okay, so I've got another question here about the annual registration. The question, I think probably for you again, Tariq, is the annual registration is being replaced from every 3 years. Is this just for tax agents or is this for BAS agents as well? So the annual registration.
So that will apply across the board to everyone, Julie, tax and BAS agents.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. Christine, I've got a question for you now around bookkeepers. So does a bookkeeper as an employee who prepares an employer's BAS need to be registered as a BAS agent?
Hi, Julie. Good question. An employee or contractor of a registered tax or BAS agent who does not provide BAS services in their own rights does not need to register. If you intend to advertise your services and charge a fee to provide BAS services, then you must register with the TBB. Also, if you're working for a registered company or partnership or BAS agent, the company or partnership might need you as an individual to be registered so that they have sufficient number of registered individual BAS agents.
Great, thank you for that, Christine. Craig, I've got a technology question for you. This one's asking, how is the TPB planning to make tax practitioners' interactions easier through technology?
Thanks, Julie. That's a really easy question to answer. So we've already done a fair bit of just recently in terms of refreshing our website and making our website easy to use. And we heard from one of our board members actually when they renewed their registration just recently, how quick and easy it was. Nobody can hear me? Can people hear me? I'm hearing. You can hear me, Julie?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep. Okay,
Yep.
good. I'll speak up. Alrighty. So yeah, we've noticed that people can now renew their registrations very quickly. Takes about 3 minutes, and yeah, very good, much improved experience. The only other thing that I think we really need to focus on coming up is to try and integrate our My Profile portal with MyGovID, which I understand government are just about to rebrand, or they are already in the process of rebranding to MyID, which will make it a little bit less confusing for people. But I understand that most practitioners would use their MyGovID probably at least once a week and probably even more regularly. So that's where we're investing in trying to make things a bit easier for people. But if there are any other ideas, please give us the feedback via our website.
Fantastic. Thank you, Craig. Tariq, I've got a question from Kylie, another CPE one, just sort of following on from what you were talking about before. Can tax and BAS agents align their CPE trienniums with their professional organisations' trienniums for their CPD requirements? And if so, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. That's a good question. Absolutely, they can align it with their professional association. So as long as they're meeting our minimum requirements, which they should be if they're already meeting the requirements for their association, just keep a record of those details and you can align it so you don't have 2 different periods.
Fantastic, thank you. Ryan, I've got another question for you. This one's about termination of tax practitioner registrations. So when a tax practitioner's registration is terminated, do they need to notify their clients?
Thanks, Julie. So when a tax practitioner has their registration terminated, the TPB now sends out an email to the clients of that tax practitioner, informing them of the outcome of the investigation and that their practitioner is now no longer registered. From a customer service perspective, we would encourage tax practitioners who have been terminated to inform their clients to support them in moving into a new business or into another tax practitioner to allow them to get the best outcome for their tax lodgements.
great. Thank you. Jeanette, I hope you're back online with us now with your AirPods in, ready to go. I've got some
Can
questions
you
for
hear
you.
me?
Yeah, that sounds
Great,
great. Much
great.
better. Thank you. So I've got someone asking about some changes that they've heard about from Treasury and making changes to the code. Could you give us some information about what's planned, what you know is happening in that space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Julie. So, late last year, government and Treasury started consultations on how they might potentially expand the code. That consultation period has closed now, and I understand that Treasury are currently considering all the submissions. But in essence, what they're looking at is potentially expanding the code with an additional 8 items. And those 8 items touch upon a range of issues around upholding the integrity of the tax profession and the tax system. It also talks to managing conflicts of interest and confidentiality when dealing with government. And there are also other obligations about keeping proper client records, keeping clients informed. Now, I know a list of 8 might sound daunting, but I think in our analysis we've done so far on proposed changes, I would imagine that the vast majority of practitioners are already complying with these obligations anyway.
Thank you. While I've got you, Jeanette, I might just keep talking to you about some of the things around annual registration. We've had people asking about the fee structure and how that will impact them come July. Could you give us some information about that?
Yeah, so the fee structure is yet to be determined. That's also another issue that's under consideration by government. The recommendation was originally made in the James Review back in 2019 to move from 3-year to annual registration. And one of the things that was recommended, not necessarily accepted by government, was just a pro rata of the fees. And again, we'll see what comes out of Treasury thinking in that area, but nothing further that we know about, Julie.
Okay, thank you. And we'll definitely keep people updated on that once we've got some more information. So just encourage you to subscribe to eNews and keep up with our social media as well. If you're not doing that already, we'll keep you updated there. I've got a question for Christine about locating the registration renewal date. Someone's asking, they've logged on to the website and they're not sure how to find that. Would you be able to tell us how to do that, Christine, please?
Sure. The best way is to go to the public register. The public register shows the renewal date and that's it. You just go to the register and you find it.
Nice and easy. Okay, great. Thank you, Christine. That's good. Okay, I've got another question here around CPE. So Tariq, I'm just wondering if you could let us know if someone does want to align their CPE with their professional association, do they need to let us know that they've done that?
No, they don't, Julie. So, for example, if you're a new practitioner and you've just been granted registration, for example, from the 1st of March this year, and you've already been a member of a professional association from 1st of January, you can align your CPE period with the TPB such that it dates back to the 1st of January for the purposes of calculating how much CPE they need in a year. And if they just keep those records and are able to produce them if and when the TPB requires them, that will be sufficient.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sally, I've got a question for you next, and this one is asking, can a tax practitioner who becomes an undischarged bankrupt continue to practice, or should they surrender their registration with us?
Thanks, Julie. No, in short, they don't need to necessarily surrender their registration with us. Becoming an undischarged bankrupt is one of the events that affect registration, and it's a notifiable event, so you do need to let us know, and it should happen within 30 days of you becoming aware of that event occurring. But in terms of what we will do with that information, it will depend on the circumstances that led to your bankruptcy. So that, could be your conduct, whether you did fail to notify us, whether you failed in terms of becoming an undischarged bankrupt, whether you failed to comply with other laws, including Bankruptcy Act and the Corporations Act, and whether you've had any adverse engagement with other regulatory bodies such as ASIC. But no, you don't have to surrender. It's just a matter of letting us know. And we always say that, be upfront with us, and then we can go from there. Thanks.
Okay, Great, thank you. Jeanette, I've got another question here which relates to the annual registration. Just people are asking what happens to the annual declaration process now if they have to renew every year.
Yeah, so very pleased to report back that we are removing the annual declaration requirement. In fact, we haven't actually had it in place for quite a few years due to the impacts of COVID, but we will be officially abolishing that once annual registration kicks in.
That's great, thank you. Christine, I've got a question for you now as well about registration renewal. I've got someone asking, is it mandatory to lodge the renewal application at least 1 month before the expiry date, or can it simply just be done any time before the registration expires?
Yeah, we send out reminders when it's time for you to renew. Your renewal form is available on my profile from 90 days before registration expires. So you can lodge your renewal application as early as 90 days before your registration expires. So really you need to make sure you lodge at least 30 days before your registration expires. And to receive notices, it's really important that you keep your contact details up to date with us.
Perfect. Thanks, Christine. Tarika, I've got Saeed asking another question here about CPE. This time, we're just wanting to find out how that's going to relate to the annual registration. Are there going to be any changes to CPE once annual registration comes into effect?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. So short answer, no. In the immediate term, the CPE policy will continue to apply as is. As I spoke about, there's a minimum hour requirement for a year, so that will be the requirement that applies. So for example, for a tax agent on an annual registration basis, they have to meet that minimum of 20 hours per year. But they have to make sure that the aggregate of a 3-year period, they still meet that 120-hour requirement. So no changes to the CPE policy at this time with annual registration coming on board.
Great, thank you. I've just got one other CPE question while I've got you there. Is reading or searching the ATO or TPB websites, can we count that towards CPE?
So reading and research can be counted as CPE, but there is a cap of 25%. So you can count up to 25% of your quota or use reading for the purposes of CPE activities.
Awesome, thank you. Ryan, I've got a question here. Someone's asking, what should they do if someone's using their agent details without their knowledge? What steps can they take?
Thanks, Julie. So the first thing they should be doing is contacting us at the TPB. If somebody's using your details, that's a significant risk for you and also for your client base. So informing us allows us to take steps to work with you to resolve the problem and to address those risks as soon as possible.
Great, thank you so much. Sally, I've got a question about cloud computing. I've got someone asking that they're sort of thinking about entering a cloud computing arrangement, and they just would like to know what the privacy considerations are.
Thanks, Julie. I'm also happy for Craig to jump in here, as I know that IT is his ballywag. But in terms of cloud computing, we have released a practice note on that, so it's available on our website, and I'm sure Julie and Ashley can give you the link to that. But in effect, you just need to think about who you're engaging with, where's the information going, is it going to go over to an overseas entity, and you know what security controls you have in place for the information, what happens if your service is disrupted, etc. So there's a lot of considerations to be had, and then you also have to consider any Privacy Act implications if you are covered by the Privacy Act. And our practice note pretty much outlines everything you should take into consideration. Craig, I'm happy for you to add anything you feel like on that one.
Not much I can add, Julie. Sorry, Sally, except for to stress the overseas element there. As soon as your data leaves our shores, they're not covered by Australian privacy laws in most instances, maybe even all. So that's something that we would always regard with a huge amount of caution.
Great, thanks, sorry, thank you for that great advice, I should say, Craig. Jeanette, I've got a question here from Joe, and Joe's asking if you're still under a three-year registration, will you still need to renew annually from 1 July?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. And that's a really good question. I've seen it come through quite a lot in the chat box.
Yeah.
And in short, essentially, whatever your current registration expiry date is, you will be able to see that through. And you will only move to annual registration the next time you renew post 1 July 2024. So hopefully that gives people a bit of clarity. So essentially, if you need to renew your registration between now and 30 June 2024, you will benefit from 3 years of registration. Any renewals after that, you will convert to annual, even if that's 2026 is when your time comes up for renewal.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, I've got a question.
Actually, Julie,
Oh, sorry,
sorry,
yeah.
Julie. Just while we're talking about annual registration, I might try to address a couple of other points that I'm seeing coming
Sure,
up
that'd be great.
in the chat box. So I think that there is a little bit of confusion, and hopefully that question I've just answered does address some of that confusion. But there's sort of been questions saying, well, why are we moving to annual registration? First up, it was a decision of government, but what it was really reflecting was that it wanted to align how registration works across other licensing and regulatory bodies. Most do work on an annual basis. We also see that annual aligns with what the professional bodies do by way of their membership. And it also aligns with some of your other obligations, for example, in relation to professional indemnity insurance. So I think moving to annual registration is an attempt to sort of streamline the process for practitioners. And as I sort of mentioned before, we are going to abolish annual declaration. So that's going to make it, we aren't duplicating any obligations here. And as Tariq mentioned before, we aren't going to change our CPE requirements. So you'll still be able to do your minimum, let's say if you're a tax agent, of 20 hours each year to get you to 120 over 3 years. We're not going to require that you do 40 hours every single year. So we're still trying to maintain a lot of flexibility in that space. So I just wanted to provide some background and I guess context as to why annual registration is coming in.
Thanks, I think that's helpful.
I'm just wondering whether I could just jump in.
Go for it.
Because I thought many tax practitioners may not have renewed their registration for 3 years. So we've received, as Craig said, really good feedback from tax practitioners saying that the process is streamlined. It's pre-filled and it takes I'm not going to say minutes, it probably is minutes, about 10 minutes to complete. And we worked really hard on making it as easy as possible. So the 1 year cycle is more streamlined. Thanks, Julie.
No problem, thank you. I actually do have a question for you as well, Christine, while I've got you. Is there a limit on the amount of income you can earn as a tax practitioner without being registered with the TPB?
No, no limit. It's all about if you intend to advertise your services and charge a fee to provide tax or BAS services, then you must register with us. Also, if you're working for a registered company or partnership or BAS agent, the company or partnership might need you as an individual to be registered as sufficient number of registered individuals or BAS agents. And that also covers there is no minimum number of tax returns you need to lodge as well.
Great, thank you for that. Craig, I've got a question about antivirus software. Do you recommend additional antivirus software to be installed on mobile devices, even though they already have built-in security?
That's a tricky question, Julie. I would say you can never be too safe from viruses. So I would probably suggest it's worthwhile just sort of double checking and potentially worthwhile exploring that option of the additional protection. It really depends on the device and what your risk profile is, but yeah, definitely worthwhile
Something
considering.
to consider. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jeanette, I've got a question from Lynn. She's asking about the new Dobbin legislation. Curious to know if it's passed and if it's scheduled to commence on 1 July 2024. And also, are there any mitigations to ensure tax practitioners are not at risk of vexatious complaints?
Thanks, Julie, and thanks, Lynn, for that really, really great question. So we refer to it as breach reporting as opposed to the Dobbin requirements, but the breach reporting requirements did pass last year, and they will be commencing on the 1st of July 2024. We at the TPB, we're preparing guidance, draft guidance initially to seek your feedback so that we can give you advice on how you need to comply with the obligations. Now, there are two aspects to the obligation. One is that for yourself, you need to notify the TPB if you have a reasonable belief that you have breached the code and that breach is significant. That obligation also extends if you observe that another tax practitioner might have breached the code and also to a significant extent as well. Now, in terms of that vexatious tax practitioner that might be notifying about another tax practitioner, we're very aware of this concern. And in our draft guidance, we're specifically highlighting that vexatious dobbers, we'll call it, will not be seen favourably by the TPB. And that would also give rise to potential other breaches of the code, for example, in relation to honesty and integrity. It might even call into question that person's fitness and propriety. So we're very, very mindful of that. And hopefully the guidance will come in the next month or so you can understand it a bit better.
Thanks, Jeanette. Ryan, I've got a question for you. This one is about the TPB public register. Can we log on to the register to find a tax agent who's not registered and has been disqualified?
Thanks, Julie. So currently, yes, if a tax practitioner has had their registration terminated, that will show up on the public register for 12 months from the date on which that termination is in place. There's ongoing legislative reform in relation to our public register with a view to expanding the information that is contained on it, with a view to increasing the length of time that that information will be contained on the public register to support other practitioners with being aware of those who have had their registration terminated or been sanctioned by the TPB, and also to allow clients to log on and find out details about the practitioner and any conduct that they may have engaged in.
Great, thank you for that. Christine, I've got Monica asking a question about professional indemnity insurance, and she's just wondering, is it a requirement or can you be covered under the insurance of the company that you work for? So do you have to have your own policy or can you be covered under someone else's?
Okay, so you must update your PII, your professional indemnity, whenever there's a change in your policy, including every time the policy is renewed. And you can update it through my profile. And yes, you can have it through your company as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. Okay, the next question I've got here is, what should I do to change from BAS agent to tax agent registration? They're just sort of commenting that they don't work for an accountant or a tax agent, so they just want to change their registration status. Christine, could you address that one? Sorry.
Yes.
Yep.
You would have to lodge a new application to change your status. There are different requirements for a BAS agent and there are different requirements for a tax agent. You have to be fit and proper. You have to satisfy the qualifications and relevant experience requirements. You must meet continuing professional education requirements. You must maintain your PII, your professional indemnity insurance. You complete the online form, you provide all the supporting evidence, and you pay your fee.
Fabulous, thank you. Tariq, I've just got some people asking about CPE again, just in terms of record keeping. Do they need to keep separate records for their CPE or can they use the same records they use for their professional association?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. You can use the same records, short answer.
Great, thank you. Okay, I've got a question about the disqualified entity as well, Tariq. I might pass that one to you. Apparently, there's a approval form on the website. Can we explain what that's needed for and how we go about using that?
Yeah, sure, Julie. So in the event that a person or entity becomes a disqualified entity, the tax practitioner can seek approval from the TPB to continue to engage, use the services of that disqualified entity. So that's where that form will come in. They might have a employee who's become disqualified. So then they lodge the form with the TPB to say, this person has become disqualified. However, I'd still like to use them as an employee. We will then consider that form by looking at obviously the events that led to the disqualifying event and the circumstances around the case, and then make a decision and notify the practitioner.
Great, thank you. Sally, I've got a question here about compliance, and if the TPB was to make a mistake in handing down a sanction, what happens in that case, and would that appear on the public register?
Yep, sure. Thanks, Julie. It's a tricky one to answer without the, background facts, but basically, if it were found to be that the TPB had made a mistake, it would go through the review process. So it probably would go to the tribunal in the first instance, because once we've made a decision, our power is spent. But when it goes to the tribunal, we enter into all forms of dispute resolution within the tribunal itself. So we don't see all our matters going through to a full hearing. We will go into settlement and discussion. So if the factual situation has changed or certain information wasn't before the TPB at the time we made a sanction decision, we'll certainly take that into account to make sure it's a just and fair outcome. And, like I said before, the utmost consideration for us is public protection and the integrity of the tax profession. So we'll certainly look at any new information that might come before us. And if there is a change in the decision, then it will be removed from the register. So the decision will only remain on the register while it's current. And if we do determine to change the decision through that tribunal process, it will be taken off the register.
Thanks, Sally. Okay, I've got a question from Lisa. So Tariq, I'll put this one to you, and it's about public liability insurance. So are BAS agents required to have that as part of their registration? And if so, is there any relief for a practitioner that operates fully online?
So the requirements for the TPB in relation to insurance around professional indemnity insurance. So you're required to have professional indemnity insurance for the purposes of registration, and there is no exemption for an entity just because they're lodging. Sorry, my lights have just gone off here. There's no exemption if you're operating just online.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Craig, I've got another question for you around cyber security. I've got someone asking, is it safe to accept cookies from a website?
Julie, it's probably worthwhile just explaining what a cookie is.
That
Firstly,
would be
we're
good,
not talking
yes.
about something you eat. So cookies are a feature of an internet browser that allows a website to record information on your computer. So they might record your name, your preferences when using their website, etc. So that's what a cookie is. Now, some of these cookies can be used to track people. So there might be a conglomerate of websites that use a cookie to say, hey, this person's been here, and then and the next website says, yes, he's been here, and so on. They build up a bit of a history of all the different websites you've been around on the internet. Now, and this is how companies market their services. So I don't see that as a problem, but just be aware of what a cookie's doing there, and you're effectively you could be potentially sharing the information with different websites, particularly marketing related ones, news websites, etc., of other websites that you've actually been to. So that's what a cookie's for. I don't see a problem with accepting them, but it really depends on how private you want to be on the internet.
Thanks, Craig. That's good to know. Tariq, I've got another CPE question for you. I've got someone asking if they don't complete their 120 hours of CPE over the 3-year period, can they ask for more time?
So we can look at extenuating circumstances. Usually the situation is you have to do the minimum 20 hours a year and 120 over the 3 years. So if you can't make the 20 in 1 year, you can try and make it up in that second or third year, and that's the ideal situation. But if there are extenuating circumstances whereby you've been unable to complete that CPE, that would be a rare occurrence, but we'd look at that on a case-by-case basis. But usually we would expect, as I said, the agents to manage that 3-year period so they can try and get the hours up.
Okay, thank you. Jeanette, I've got a question here about the new disqualified entity code items, and I'm just, someone's asking, what are the reasons for a disqualification for a tax or BAS agent with the disqualified entity policy, and would this information be available on the TPB website?
Sure, thanks, Julie. So I think the first part of that question is, what is the definition of a disqualified entity?
Yeah,
Is that
that'd be
right?
good. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, so if that's the question that's being asked, it's there is a test that is defined or criteria that's outlined in the legislation, but essentially there are 3 areas that you've got to look at. In order to be a disqualified entity, you first and foremost cannot be an existing registered tax or BAS agent. Secondly, that entity that could be disqualified has to be an entity. So that could be an employee, a contractor, an associate. And then the third part of that criteria looks at certain events that occurred in the last 5 years. The list is fairly long. I think it's about 7 or 8 from memory, but includes things such as being convicted of a serious taxation offence, having a registration application rejected by the TPB, being subject to action by the TPB previously. So if you bring all those things together, the TPB, we won't be having a register of disqualified entities on our website. And that's because when you look at the criteria, it extends far beyond what the TPB holds as information. We only really sort of hold 2 or 3 pieces of that criteria.
Thanks, Jeanette. Okay, I've got a question again for Tariq. This one's about professional association membership. Is it compulsory for a BAS agent to have a membership with a recognised professional association?
Short answer to that one, Julie, no, it's not compulsory.
Okay, great. Next one I've got here is probably again for you, Tariq, from Robert, and this one's asking about conditional tax agent registration. Someone who's got an R&D condition on their registration, and how much CPE are they required to do over the 3 years? Is it 45 hours with a minimum of 5? Could you confirm that?
Thanks, Julie. Yes, so for all conditional agents, the requirement is 45 hours over the triennium and 5 hours in any given year. However, we do have special categories on our website published where that could be further reduced. So just jump on the TPB website, and if there's a category of conditional registration which you fit under, you might have a different requirement, but it will be no more than 45 over 3.
Great, thank you for that. Jeanette, I've got Philip asking a question here, and he's curious to know, are there any conflicts of interest that would affect a tax agent's registration? Are there things they need to consider in that space?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the code items, there's one specific code item which talks about the fact that you've got to act in the best interest of your client legally. And so there are some conflicts that practitioners might be faced with that they need to consider whether they can act in the best interest of their clients. One example that we do unfortunately see relatively often is situations where we have marriage breakdowns and you've got a tax agent who might be representing both sides. In that case, it may be a conflict which cannot be managed. So it's definitely needs to be considered quite deeply by the practitioner.
Great, thank you for that. Christine, I've got a question here about registration, and the question is, under what circumstances am I required to have 2 registrations?
Yeah. If you register as a company or partnership, you need to have a sufficient number of registered individuals who carry out supervisory arrangements on behalf of the business. So, for example, if you operate your business through a company, the company will need to be registered and you will need to be registered as an individual as well. Or the company will need to have other registered individuals who can carry out supervisory arrangements on its behalf.
Great, thank you. I've got someone asking about a link to the conditional registration requirements. We'll send that out after the webinar today. We'll add that to our hyperlinks document. Again, I've got a lot of comments here, Jeanette, about the fee structure for annual registration. I know that you've covered that again, but could you just reiterate what the outcome is at this stage?
Yeah, so the outcome is unknown. Quite simply, it's under consideration by government. As I mentioned before, with the James review, it was recommended that the fee should be prorated, but that was simply a recommendation and under government consideration. Sorry,
Thank
I can't
you.
offer much more.
No, that's great. I just thought I'd cover it off again. I know that we have talked about it, but it's coming through quite a lot. So yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. Christine, I've just got another question here about applications for a tax agent or BAS agent registration. I'm just wondering if you could tell us roughly how long it takes to have that processed.
Okay. It all depends on the documentation and whether all the information is with the TPB. We have a team of people that process new applications for tax agents and BAS agents. If all the documents are in place, then we do try and ensure that we have a 30-day processing time, and sometimes it's even less. So it all depends on the documents provided and whether they meet all the criteria.
Great. And I guess the key is just to ensure that you've got everything attached when you're submitting your registration or your renewal as well, just to speed up the process. And we do actually have a video online helping people with that process. So we'll share that as well after the webinar today. Craig, I've got a question from Michael here, and he's just saying that he's recently read some articles about intercepted session tokens over public Wi-Fi that have allowed a third party to continue a session within a secure website. Do you have any advice on that at all?
Yes, absolutely. The public Wi-Fi is gets me having sort of conniptions, Julie. So whenever you use public Wi-Fi, often the product when it's free is you and your data. So if you're not paying for a service, just be wary, and Wi-Fi is no exception. So yeah, I would say don't use public Wi-Fi because that's a big risk. And yes, it is possible to harvest session tokens, and that is something that hackers do. So yes, you best not to use public Wi-Fi. Use your SIM card if you can.
Thanks, Craig. That's good advice. Sally, I've got a question here about non-compliant tax agents. It's just asking if we're banning them for 5 years, is that enough? Why can't the TPB ban someone permanently?
At this stage, the legislation only allows us to do a maximum period of 5 years, a non-application period. You know, we did have the independent review into the TPB, and one of the recommendations out of that was to consider whether we could expand that period of time. But, you know, we're getting an expanded suite of sanctions, or they're being discussed right now, and it may well be that something's to be considered. But I suppose we would say even after the 5 years has finished, you still need to meet the fit and proper person requirement to re-enter the system. So just because a 5-year ban's been imposed and expired, it doesn't mean that that person will automatically get back in and be registered. We still consider whether they meet the fit and proper person requirement. So there's still a safeguard in place regardless of the fact it's not a permanent period.
Great, that's good to know. Thank you. Ryan, I've got a question here. Someone's asking, does the TPB actively monitor online tax preparers that seem to be based overseas?
Thanks, Julie. So we monitor anyone who is providing tax agent services for a fee, and we work with the ATO to conduct that monitoring. So We work with the ATO to identify people who aren't registered and who are providing tax agent services, whether that be located in Australia or overseas, and we'll look to take appropriate action where that is identified.
Great, thank you. Okay, next question I've got is for Christine, and just asking, do I need to notify the TPB if I'm taking a period of time out from business? So just for example, if someone's taking leave for 6 to 12 months, do they need to let us know about that?
No, they don't need to notify us. However, they need to keep in mind that they still have to meet the continuing professional education requirements when they go and renew their registration. Also, they could be the sole supervising tax practitioner responsible for supervision and control of a company or a partnership, and they need to ensure that another supervising tax practitioner is linked to the entity before they take leave.
Great, thank you. Ryan, I've got another question for you, and this one's about high-risk behaviours of tax practitioners. Just wondering if you could give us some insights into what some of those behaviours are.
Thanks, Joy. So we see a whole range of different high-risk behaviours, and we receive that information from a variety of sources. We receive tip-offs from the ATO, from other registered practitioners, and clients around agents who are engaging in high-risk behaviour. High-risk behaviours can include criminal conduct, so that may amount to fraud, theft from clients, or other conduct, or it may be in the provision of the services. So they may be advising clients to claim deductions that they're not entitled to omit income from their returns, or other such behaviours in a tax sense. So it covers the full range of behaviours, both from sort of purely criminal to tax related, to even stuff that's sort of adjacent to the tax space as well.
Great, thank you for that. Tariq, I've got someone asking here, is it illegal for a staff member to handle the preparation of tax returns if it's under a tax agent's supervision?
Acting under the supervision and control of a registered tax agent, you're allowed to do obviously anything that the tax agent would do, and then it's ultimately the tax agent who will be responsible for that service that's provided by the employees and others.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thanks, Tariq. Jeanette, I've got someone here that's saying that they're semi-retired. They're just curious, is there a compulsory number of clients that they need to retain to keep their registration?
Yeah, no compulsory client base that needs to be retained. If we assume that this person is, semi-retired, let's assume they've been in the system since 1988, they have different renewal requirements. But if you were first registered after 1988, you need to be mindful you've got to meet relevant experience, which means a certain amount of months or hours in order to renew your registration. So no client minimum, but there could be a month minimum.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sally, I've got a question for you. It's sort of cybersecurity related, so it could be either for you or for Craig, but can diligence around cybersecurity affect fitness and propriety, hard to say, if there's a breach of data?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. As with all my answers today, I suppose it's all factual, in terms of what's actually occurred. But I mean, if you haven't taken appropriate steps to protect your client's confidentiality, then we would be considering whether you've acted or failed to act with competence. And depending on the gravity and how much information might have been potentially disclosed in your actions, it could result in a finding that you're no longer fit and proper. But we would look at all the circumstances of what happened, what controls you had in place, what steps you took to remediate clients to stop any further loss of data and things like that. So as with all code matters and investigations that we undertake, they're always on a case-by-case basis, and we do look into all the circumstances of, the action and what a practitioner has done before we make the assessment as to whether they are fit and proper or whether they've breached the code. And I'm sure Craig could give you a lot more detail on, what is good for cybersecurity.
Did you want to add anything, Craig?
No, I think that was a good answer. Thanks, Sal. Spot on.
Great, thank you both. Tariq, I've got a question for you. Just wondering, what is the difference between disqualified and suspended?
Yep. So thanks, Julie. So for the purposes of disqualified, that will be someone that's not a registered tax agent or BAS agent. And obviously, as Jeanette spoke about earlier, it'll be someone that has had one of those type of events occurred in relation to them. For example, a TPB sanction, or they've been convicted of a serious tax offence, something like that. A suspended agent, on the other hand, is someone that is a registered tax agent, but has had their registration suspended for a period of time. So they're no longer registered just for that period of time of their suspension. And once that finishes, then their registration continues again.
Great, thank you. Okay, Ryan, question for you. If a person surrenders their TPB registration when an investigation is threatened, what will the TPB do? Will they stop the investigation or will they carry it through?
Thanks, Julie. So if somebody looks to surrender their registration whilst we're making preliminary inquiries, then the TPB may decide not to accept the surrender, and we can commence an investigation as long as it's within 30 days of receiving that surrender request. In making that decision, we'll consider what the specific circumstances are, what the conduct is that the practitioner may have engaged in, and what the risk is from allowing them to remain in the system whilst we conduct that investigation, if that's the decision.
Great, thank you. Tariq, I've got another question here around the disqualified entity. Would you be able to let us know when, with the code items around disqualified entity, when I employ someone to provide tax agent services on my behalf, am I now required to check their history?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Short answer is yes, you do have to take reasonable steps and make reasonable inquiries about individuals to make sure that they're not a disqualified entity. We've got guidance out there on the website, which gives a little bit of insight on what those reasonable steps might look like. But we're in the process of finalising that disqualified entities guidance. It's currently there as an exposure draft. The period has closed, so we will shortly be finalising that information sheet. But yeah, happy for people to jump on and have a look there. There is further information.
Thanks, Tariq, and we'll share the link to that as well so people know where to find it. Christine, I've got a question for you now. I've got someone asking, when employing a trainee tax or BAS agent, do they need to be registered with the TPB?
I'm going to say no. An employee or contractor of a registered tax or BAS agent who does not provide tax agent services in their own rights does not need to be registered. However, if you're working for a registered company or partnership tax agent, the company or partnership might need them again to be have sufficient number of registered individual tax practitioners. So registered tax or BAS agents have to ensure that they've got adequate supervision and control over the trainee tax or BAS agent who isn't registered with them.
Great, thank you. We're sort of hitting the finish mark here, but I might just ask one more question of you, Craig, and that is it safe for clients to send their TFN and date of birth via email?
Not typically. An email is almost like sending a postcard from that next holiday you have up on the north coast of New South Wales, lovely area. But you send postcard back home. People can see the nice picture. The postman can see it. He can see all about your holiday that you're having. And if you put your email, your TFN and your date of birth in an email, it's just like that. It's every server on the internet that passes your email on is a server that has access to all your data. So it's not encrypted. So yeah, I'd say caution, not a good idea.
Great, thank you for that advice. So yeah, we might leave
Julie,
it there.
I might just add to that.
Janine. Yep.
So Julie, if I can just add to that, we do have specific guidance on our website around disclosing client TFNs and TFN information in emails. And if you have a look at that, we can send a link later. It says that you cannot. It raises a lot of concerns from our end. And just while I've got the floor, just very quickly, Julie, if I can just say, I've seen a lot of questions in the chat box about client linking. It's not that we're ignoring you with those questions. We are simply not placed to answer those. We're the Tax Practitioners Board. They are very much questions for the ATO. We can pass on these questions for them, but unfortunately, we just can't answer those.
Thanks, Jeanette. That's really good to know. Okay, so we will leave it there for today. Just to give you some information on how to keep up to date with us. So obviously our website, which we've referred to quite a bit today, tpb.gov.au, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. We also have a newsletter that goes out each month, which is our TPB e-news. So you can subscribe to that once again on our website at tpb.gov.au/newsroom. And also you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to receive notifications when we post new videos. And we do record all of our webinars and have a comprehensive library online that you can view at your leisure. And the good news is you can still claim your CPE for viewing those videos. I just wanted to say a big thank you to Jeanette, Christine, Craig, Sally, Tariq and Ryan for sharing your insights today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for sending through your questions. I do want to highlight that we did receive a very big number of questions. There were so many there today. So I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question today, but we will put together some FAQs and have those available on our website soon. So hopefully we'll be able to answer most of the questions there. So just to finish up, I just wanted to also let you know that we'll be launching an exit survey and we would appreciate it if you could take the time to complete it. We're just looking for any insights you have for us that will help us improve on our webinars. And also if you've got a topic that's of interest to you, please let us know and we will endeavour to add that to our program as well. So I'll just let you know that it will open up in your browser as you leave the webinar today. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our team of experts that were here with us today, and we'll talk to you again soon. So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so much.